Good afternoon, everybody. Great to be talking to you this afternoon. We are going to be covering a very specific part of the customer's entire purchase experience. We're going to be talking about the post-purchase experience that a customer has. This is not a topic that is often covered, and we want to try helping you out to see how this can be set up to be a really game-changing advantage for your business to acquire customers and especially retain them for life. And speaking to you today, again, this is Shri from lateshipment.com. We have specifically years of experience working in the shipping and logistics space, especially dealing with customer experience in the post-purchase space after a package has been shipped out. And I'm really privileged to also have Ashwin here with me from Freshworks. He specifically works for the customer success team, where they, again, just like how we deal with millions of packages in this space, they have firsthand experience dealing with issues here and also working with customers specifically in this phase of the customer experience.
Hi, Sri. Yeah, thanks for having me here. And customer experience is something that I am personally passionate about, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have in the next 1 hour.
So before we hop in, let's have a quick poll to make sure on the technical side we are coming through fine on the audio front, and also to ensure that we're not having any more issues, etc., as we are going through the webinar. So let me pause for a few seconds while the poll is on, and you're able to respond to it to see if the audio is coming through all right. So based on the responses, I think so far we're not facing any audio issues, etc. So that is great. And so let's dive right into what we are here to speak about. But then before we actually get to talking about the post-purchase phase of the customer experience, let's spend a minute or two talking about customer experience in general, right? I'm sure this is something everybody here, especially if you're from the retail side, can identify with. The purchase experience, especially if you're running a website or even a brick and mortar store, I'm sure you are measuring and trying to optimize every point of interaction that the customer has with your brand, with your store, with your website, etc., before they go ahead and complete a purchase, right? And as we move more and more towards an experience-driven consumer, brands are forced to invest in the experience overall rather than just the product or just the price aspect of the purchase. Again, we see this routinely in surveys, etc. About 70–80% of businesses are very vocal about their investments in this experience aspect of purchases. Ashwin.
Yes, Sri, I am totally with you on this. And we've seen a lot of improvement in how brands invest in customer experience over the last couple of years. And that actually is because of how customers have evolved and how businesses have evolved doing business as well. Let's actually go back in time and look at how we would have made purchase decisions back then, right? If in the late 90s, if you were to buy a television, what you would actually do is there would be 3 or 4 brands that would come on your mind, and you would end up buying something from those brands. So a lot of companies invested in branding and making sure they are on top of your mind when you want to make a decision. So that's where a lot of brands and companies invested in back then. And then after the internet era came, and a lot of customers are in this age what we call the informed buyers, right? So they tend to know a lot more about the product and also about the brand. So staying on top as a brand is not sufficient, and you would have to make sure the product is better. So the customers actually know what pixel it is, or what kind of resolution it is, what kind of display it has. So the customers are informed these days. And that was the case after, say, 2005 to 2015. But today's world, more than brand and product, which is still equally important, experience has actually taken over. And as much as a company would invest in a brand or a product, they have to equally invest in the experience part of it. Let me actually take one example that's really something that I've experienced as well personally. Take a company like Apple, right? Apple is known for their product. They've made a masterpiece when it comes to making an iPhone. and they're also on top when it comes to a phone brand. So they've done both, but Apple actually did not stop with that. They've gone that extra mile, and they still have that Apple store with them. So Apple stores are not retailed out. Apple owns that stores to make sure they have control of the customer experience. And that really shows out when we actually walk into an Apple store and buy a mobile phone. The experience is very, very different compared to, say, walk into any other brick and mortar store and buy a phone. When I walk into an Apple store, I feel like I'm talking to a friend to actually help me pick up a particular model that I like, or a particular color of watch that I like. And they have actually gone deep into how the experience is. And even if after I made that decision to buy, I don't go and stand in a queue or stand in an aisle to make a payment and get the product out, right? Which a lot of brick and mortar store does. They actually get your card details right there in the counter, and you just swipe your card with your friend and you just walk out with a phone. So they've thought through so much because it's still owned by Apple, and they invested in a lot. So that shows how much they really invested in customer experience, and which actually keeps them on the top. So even with stats, when we look at it, 1 in 3 customers will actually leave the brand if they have one single bad experience. So that is actually really expensive as a business if you look at it. And with all the evolution that we have seen, that's in terms of business, as a customer, the trend is also changing. So today, the number of people who walk up to a store and buy is going down compared to the number of shoppers who do it online. Today's world, people would want to order things online and make sure they get it at their home or at their work, or they order it for a friend. So the trend is evolving, and we see e-commerce as a space where a lot of purchase decisions would be made. But the expectation with a customer is still the same, but there is a small difference when it comes to getting that product at hand from a customer side, which not a lot of us would have actually given it a thought. If I walk into a retail store, I get the product the moment I actually make that purchase, right? So the moment I pay my cash at the billing counter, I own the product right then and there, and then I walk out with the product. But not the case when an e-commerce sale happens, right? There is a phase that's involved. Say if I make a payment today, it takes a couple of days, depending on the promise that you made with a customer. It takes either a day or a week or 10 days or 2 days, whatever. So that phase, I still don't have the product with me, but still I made the purchase. So that's a phase that is not there in a retail store, and which is why not a lot of brands have focused on in an e-commerce front. And when it comes to e-commerce purchase, the customer's expectations are still the same. They still expect a high experience front, which Sriram will actually talk to you in detail about now.
So as Ashwin is speaking about it here, right, to define the post-purchase experience in very specific terms, we are talking about the period in the entire purchase experience where a customer has completed his purchase. This is especially specific, especially applicable in the online space, right? Customer has completed the purchase, but he still hasn't received his product. There is a 2-3 day window while the product is in transit to him. When we look at this phase, this post-purchase phase from a psychological perspective, right? You imagine you are hailing an Uber, and you pretty much, unfortunately, due to weather conditions, etc., you order an Uber. There is a 20-minute wait, right? You're miserable about it. You're not happy about the wait. The car finally comes there. You're not too happy. But then as the journey progresses towards the end, if the driver basically makes you feel at ease, right? He wishes you well, tells you to have an amazing day, maybe cracks a joke, right? Helps you walk out of the cab in a smiling fashion. That is probably what you're going to remember about the entire experience, right? You're not going to pretty much carry the experience of waiting 20 minutes up front. And that is something which is called the peak end rule in psychology, right? As a customer, as any human, you tend to remember the peak of any experience you had, that is the best or the worst part of the experience. Followed by that, you tend to remember how the experience ended. And later, you form an impression about the entire experience based on these things, right? So when we are talking about the post-purchase phase here, if you're like most merchants, you probably consider your obligation to a purchase to be complete when you package a product, leave it at the doorstep of your warehouse. You have done everything right. You've optimized your website. You've made sure everything was packaged in time. The pickup even happened on time. But then the 2-day window where the purchase is not really in your control, it's in the hands of a shipping carrier, it's in transit to a customer. That phase often has things which go wrong, right? 1 in 10 orders, 1 in 8 orders often have an issue here. And typically, most brands tend to learn about it only from a customer after he has had an unhappy experience. And this is a problem, right? In fact, let's have a simple poll here. And I'm sure there are many merchants here. If you could tell us how you actually learn about a bad experience a customer had on the delivery front when a carrier messed up. Do you actually learn about it from the customer when he calls into your support team, or do you learn it ahead of when the mistake actually happens? So let's give it a few seconds to let everybody have a chance to respond to this. So, I'm looking at the results for what we just looked at as far as the poll is concerned. Overwhelmingly, about majority of people basically said they learn about an issue when a customer has already faced it and then calls the support team back, right? And that's really not a great situation to be in. And when you think about it, I may be pointing it out now, but maybe somebody in your brand, somebody in your company has thought about it, right? And then it's been around for a long time. The obvious question is, why has this issue not been addressed yet? And there are couple of pretty obvious reasons for this, right? When you think about the history of brick and mortar retail, the store experience we spoke about, where a customer picks something out, walks up to the checkout counter, walks out with the product, that part of the experience translates almost in an equal fashion to an online purchase, right? Customer comes to the website, they check out, they finish the purchase and pay for it. So that part of the experience, we've spent decades, even centuries optimizing it. Every part of it is understood. Customers' emotions are understood. So obviously that portion of the online experience was always had a lot of attention. But then in the online phase or online purchases, which have come around in the last 20 years or so, the post-purchase space is quite new. So we haven't had the same amount of insight or same amount of attention paid to it. Brands haven't got around to it yet. In fact, the first challenge that had to be overcome in the post-purchase phase was the speed of delivery. We started with seeing about 5-7 day purchase delivery windows, which have slowly shrunk down. Now it's almost expected to have 1 or 2 day shipping, right? So we slowly expect, or we're already seeing the experience aspect also transferring to the post-purchase phase in the online world, where brands are starting to pay attention now to the experience that a customer has on the delivery front. The second part of it is, of course, the involvement of shipping carriers here. If you are like most businesses, you rely on a shipping carrier like, say, FedEx or UPS or any of these carriers out there to be responsible for the order in the post-purchase space. When you think about it, though, these carriers are really third-party contractors you work with, right? When you're checking out with a product in the retail store, you have an employee of your brand. You have somebody who represents your brand take care of the checkout experience. Here, you're letting a third party control the entire experience altogether. Your objectives as a brand, your identity as a brand is not always what the shipping carrier has in mind when they're dealing with the delivery. For them, it's just yet another shipment, right? Their employees, the people who are handling those shipments, the sorting centers which are handling those shipments are evaluated completely differently. So your objectives are not always aligned. And the best of brands, if you think about it, Amazon, especially this holiday season, they are doing their own last mile deliveries without relying on a shipping partner. They've severed ground contracts with FedEx. They're only relying to a limited capacity with shipping carriers. They're developing their own last mile networks. The main reason for that is to take control of this portion of the experience from shipping carriers. And now that we've established the post-purchase space being of particular significance in the online purchase world, and also knowing what issues are present here, let's maybe spend a minute thinking about what we would be addressing if we turn around and start addressing issues in this space. One is, of course, the failure rates. I mean, like we said, about 1 in 10 shipments, 1 in 8 shipments meets with a failure, delay, or misdelivery, damage, etc. when it's in transit. So being able to address these issues ahead of schedule before they happen means you have the ability to impact failure rates. In addition to this, the post-purchase phase also introduces a lot of additional places where you will be able to interact with the customer. Being able to take advantage of these additional points of engagement, creating positive reinforcement about your brand is an opportunity which is again available here. And again, the post-purchase piece, even though we're talking about it in particular, is part of the entire purchase experience. So being able to make a positive impact here means your overall customer experience gets elevated. So this is especially important because we spoke about customers between online and retail, right? Even though the modes or the channels they use to purchase is different, the emotions of a customer, the emotions of a human making that purchase is pretty much the same irrespective of what channel they decide to use.
Yes, Sriram, that's absolutely true. And that's something that I see at work every day as well. The pretty difference that I spoke to you about earlier when it comes to retail and e-commerce experiences, when the customer walks out with the product in their hand after they make the purchase, they're pretty excited. They have it on their hand and they're ready to try it and experience it. But in an e-commerce world, that's actually not the case. So we are giving them a couple of days, or there's some time frame that's involved after they've made that decision. So there's so much emotion in a customer's thought process, which we have actually seen in an everyday world. So in my world, I call it the implementation phase, because at Freshworks, we actually have customers buy, and then it takes some time for the customers to start using the product. So that phase is very crucial for us. And as a brand, as a company, I personally feel that everyone should engage with the customers and invest some time and effort into it to actually talk to them and get some emotions out of them. A couple of things that will run in their mind is, if they've actually made the right decision or not. So we are giving them a time to think, for which they will actually think if I've spent enough, or if they're ordering it for someone else, then there comes the thought of, will that person actually like it, or should I have ordered a different size? So there's just so much thinking involved. During the time, we can constantly engage with them and see if we can help them out in any way for that matter, right? And especially during the holiday season, I'm sure a lot of you will actually order a lot of gifts to say your friends, or you'll be ordering a lot of things for yourself, be it either sale that comes up. With dealing with a lot of e-commerce companies, right? So we usually see a huge amount of inflow in traffic that peaks during the season. And a couple of things here, when it comes to the e-commerce business, or when you do retailing, this is the peak season, right? Holidays is something where you don't want to have frustrated customers with you. You would want to make sure you do a lot of business in the season. And with that comes the challenge of having the temporary people there. Not a lot of companies can afford to staff temporarily to make sure you can manage that extra load that comes in. So with all these challenges, we have seen with the support team, there is actually 50% increase in the volume of inflow of tickets, which means if you are getting 1,000 tickets, say in July or August, during December, the same team is going to get 1,500 tickets that your support team has to answer and talk to the customers, which is not an easy job. 50% increase is actually a lot, and it's also more reactive. And when we actually drill down deeper and saw, hey, okay, how do we make it easier for the agents to actually help the customers out, we wanted to understand what type of tickets are coming in, and then we realized 80% of them are actually about ETS of the orders, which means 8 out of 10 tickets are hey, will I get my order on time? Hey, will my friend get it before Christmas? Hey, where is my order right now? I haven't heard any updates from you guys. So these are typically the questions that we see. So which actually means, customers are anticipating their order to come, and with whatever time frame you were promised as well, there has not been proactive updates, or there has been some delay in the order, which we could have let the customers know beforehand to avoid all these inflow. And also during the peak season, it is actually not good to have our CSATs drop, right? So after working with all these companies, we have actually seen CSAT drop during December, which means your support agents are also not doing that qualitative support because our volume of tickets is increasing, you are going to see a lot of unhappy customers or unhappy experience when it comes to dealing with support. So we were thinking, how can we change all this, or how do we solve for this problem? Which is why we are getting into doing more of proactive support and letting the customers know in advance, which Sriram is going to talk to you about.
So when Ashwin spoke about dropping CSAT scores, etc., right? It's something we typically see with businesses. We see a lot of issues on the post-purchase side, and we also see a lot of these issues actually not having great outcomes, right? Let's try illustrating that with a very, very simple example. I know we're in the middle of the holiday season now. So let's imagine a customer comes in, orders something from your store, right? We already established there isn't a lot of emotional aspects of the purchase, right? Maybe he wants a gift in time for Christmas to put on the Christmas tree for his son or maybe his mom. So he's excited about his purchase. He really anticipates having that purchase come in on time. And all indicators, be it updates from your brand, you've done everything right. You've sent it out, you put it in the hands of a shipping carrier. And even the tracking updates, the tracking number you sent him tells him that it's going to be delivered on time. But when he actually walks into when he actually looks out for his purchase being delivered on the 23rd, as the promise was made, right? You're often going to figure out, again, this is not an uncommon occurrence we are talking about. Holiday stats pretty much suggest, or even regular stats suggest, about 1 in 10 shipments actually meets with an issue while it's in the post-purchase space, while it's in the hands of a shipping carrier, right? So this person who places a lot of importance to his order, right, a lot of emotional connect to what he purchased, discovers on the afternoon of the 23rd that his order is not going to be there by the end of the day, and he's going to miss putting that under the tree for Christmas. That's a miserable situation to be in, right? The customer invested a lot emotionally. He's angry, he's frustrated, he's disappointed, and maybe he even realizes that the shipping carrier is to blame for this problem, right? But his anger, though, is still also going to spill over to your brand. Because when you put yourselves in the customer's shoes, when you think about it, he made the purchase from your company, your business, your brand, right? He actually was expecting your brand to stay in control of his experience till the product reached his doorstep and he was able to unbox it. But here, because things have gone wrong, he doesn't have his product. So he's obviously going to be frustrated with your brand for it, and he's probably not going to be shopping from you again, or at least going to think twice or twice about purchasing something from you again, right? So this is an issue where you had nothing wrong from your side of the equation, but then still the outcome of this issue was incredibly bad. Right? The customer calls into your support team, is really angry. Whatever your support team is able to talk to him about at that point, the problem has already happened. It's not something that your support team can do to fix that problem. Maybe they can try addressing his concern, maybe try being apologetic, but then the problem has still happened. And being proactive means preventing the situation rather than reacting to that situation from a very bad position that you put the customer in. Continuing on, I mean, it's not about these bad outcomes we are talking about, right? Again, the 9 out of 10 shipments which may have gotten delivered on time, those shipments also have a very, very important aspect to them. Maybe we can start this off with a poll here. When you think about it, when your customers are having an order shipped out to them as a brand, how many of you actually send the customer out to a shipping carrier's website or web page to track their order versus a page on your own website? I'll give you a few seconds to respond to this before we pick up where we left off. So again, while we are having this poll open, I mean, we see quite a few responses. I think a majority of them say they actually send people out to a carrier's website, right? This is very common. I mean, you may have received shipments from a lot of stores you purchased from, and they probably send you a link where you click on that link, you're either directed to FedEx or UPS's website, where a page like what you see on the right opens up, right? The interesting fact around this is, on an average, your customer actually tracks his shipment while it's in transit about 4 to 5 times, right? And this means they're clicking on this link about 4 or 5 times, or maybe contacting your support team 4 or 5 times while the shipment is in transit. If they're being sent to a page, what we see on the right, which is a page of UPS's website, that doesn't in any way reflect your brand's identity. And you probably spend a lot of time and effort curating your website, making sure people have an amazing customer experience when they land on that website. But being directed to a shipping carrier's website while they're still in the purchase process, right? In the post-purchase phase, the customer purchase process is probably not a great idea, right? And then the funny part about this is the page we often refer to. The funny part about it is if you notice that page, there is an ad on that page which tries selling your customers premium UPS tracking, right? Imagine this is a customer you spend a lot of time and effort gaining. And here you're sending them over to UPS and they're selling something to that customer which comes from UPS's brand, right? At first glance, you may be tempted to ask, like, how much is UPS paying you for sending a customer their way, right? But then the reality is you're actually paying UPS to make sure your packages are transported. So this is the problem that I'm trying to talk about. You as a brand may be investing a lot of time, money, and effort in having an interaction with the customer before the purchase is made. You're maybe sending them proactive chat prompts, right? When they fill out a form, you're having somebody from your sales team immediately reach out to them. You're placing a lot of value on the interaction with the customer because you know you can make sure you have a positive interaction with the customer and convince them to purchase from you. The same customer, after the purchase is complete, while the package is still in transit, he still has the high of that purchase, right? The peak of that purchase. And he's very eager, expectant of receiving that order. He decides to voluntarily reach out to your brand. The value of that interaction is still the same, often before purchase and after purchase, right? But then if you're sending them to a third-party web page, right? Imagine being able to send them to a page on your own website, which reinforces your brand identity. Maybe upsells or cross-sells them something related to the purchase. Maybe tells them something about the product they just bought, tells them something about your brand. And maybe they're picking up the phone, calling somebody on your support team. Imagine having a friendly conversation which tells them a little more about the product they just bought, rather than just throwing some information their way and hoping that they're just finding their shipment while it's in transit, right? So that brings us to how things could be better. I mean, we touched on these in the last couple of slides, but then consolidating that, when you think about it, the post-purchase phase, when a shipment is in transit, when things go wrong, imagine being able to identify these issues 1 to 3 days in advance of them actually happening, right? Or maybe right as they're happening. And having somebody from your support team be alerted about an issue that is about to unfold. Have them proactively take care of that issue. Reach out to a customer, maybe offer him $10 to compensate for the inconvenience. Maybe understand what a high value order is. Maybe ship something else overnight to make sure it reaches the customer on time. Right? You're turning the entire experience around here. You're mitigating or preventing that problem from happening rather than dealing with it after the entire problem has happened and the customer is unhappy because of it, right? And in addition to it, when you are interacting with the customer in the post-purchase space, you take advantage of every opportunity you have, right? When a customer decides to reach out to your brand, you're sending them to a very well-curated page on your own website, which reinforces your brand identity, strengthens the bond you have with your customer, engages with them while they're really happy about the purchase, right? And also enables them to actively reach out to somebody on your team, talk to them, like chat with them about the product or on the phone, and always trying to maybe reinforce the purchase aspect, reinforce the product aspect of what they just bought, so they walk away feeling better about the purchase, feeling more connected with your brand, right? And that brings us to, we have been speaking about this problem for a long time because we have given this problem a lot of thought. We knew this existed. We knew this was affecting pretty much all brands around us, all companies around us to a large extent. So when we set out to solve this problem, we figured out it was not like a simple solution which had just one part to it, right? Again, coming from the shipment tracking space, we track millions of shipments in real time. We help businesses out in figuring out their last mile. But then even with tracking millions and millions of packages a year, we figured out, well, we were having tracking numbers. We were often able to predict what could potentially go wrong with a shipment. But all the information we had dealt with a shipment or a tracking number independently. For us to be able to identify which customer was maybe going to be affected when a shipment was not being delivered on time, we needed the help of a system like fresh sales, right? Where customer information was stored, order information was stored. Being able to get that information from there meant we were able to enrich the information we had about shipments with information about customers and orders. At the same time, we had our own interfaces for displaying information about shipments that were going wrong, etc., etc. But then we were always one step away from actually being able to stay in front of a support agent's dashboard who is dealing with issues of this nature, because we were not connected to a tool like Freshdesk, which was open in front of a customer's dashboard all day. And having that integration piece again meant we were not only learning about these issues, we knew everything about who is facing this issue, what order is facing this issue, and we were able to deliver that information proactively to a Freshdesk dashboard where people were actively looking to deal with issues as far as customers were concerned. And easy way of visualizing it, well, when we learned that a shipment was facing an issue, right, we were able to enrich that with information from Fresh Sales about that order, about that customer, and we were pushing it to Freshdesk where seamlessly support agents were able to step in and solve that issue, right? I'm sure Ashwin can maybe elaborate on how that's handled on the Freshdesk side.
Yes, Sriram. So a lot of times when we work with the support team, the reason we are not able to handle reactive support, the increase in volume with the reactive support environment, is we don't know how to isolate it beforehand, right? With the late shipment, that exact problem has been solved for. So if as a vendor, I'm going to ship 1,000 packages today, there might be only 40 or 50 packages that might need the support team's intervention. Everything else could be on time, which you don't need to actually spend time and effort in investigating where it is. So this integration allows us to get those 50 packages as a ticket to the support team and just proactively reach out to those customers and tell them, hey, there is a weather delay or there's just a carrier problem. Your package will be with you. Just bear with us in 1 or 2 days. So just like how Sriram spoke about the Uber experience, we are turning the experience around by being proactive. And if you know that customer is actually a valuable customer, that customer is probably ordering with you 5 to 10 times a month, and that customer is going to come back to you every time, then you can send a complimentary order again with them, or you can turn that experience around to that customer to make sure the same customer is going to come back to you again. But imagine a case where we don't do this, right? If you are being reactive, the customer will come back to you and ask about the order. But when you say, hey, it's delayed, there is an expectation and reality mismatch, because of which, as we saw from the stats, we will end up losing one out of 3 of those customers. So it's equally important to retain those customers with us, which as a business, I'm sure if you're a business owner, you will relate to it, because existing clients or existing customers are actually our brand ambassadors. There is no one else better to actually market our product than our existing customers. So it's very important that we give them the premium support that they deserve. And also, instead of spending extra money in marketing, trying to get that new customer in who actually doesn't know your brand, your existing customer, if we make them happy, they are going to bring 4 more customers for you, and that will all happen organically. So that actually is an easier step to do than spending a lot of time and effort in marketing. And it's also an industry benchmark that we know that retaining an existing customer is very economical. It's actually 5 times more expensive to get a new customer on board than retaining an existing customer. So as the quote says here, always don't be transactional. Transactions are short-lived, but we always try to build relationships with that customer that will last for life. So go that extra mile like that, like Apple Stores does, and the customers will come back to you for more orders, which is very crucial for any business that you run. And Sriram can throw some tangible numbers to this as well.
So I know we touched on the solution we were able to build out to address this huge gap in the post-purchase space, especially in the online world. But then more importantly, it was not about the solution we built out. We wanted to leave you guys with the reality of the situation here, right? We wanted you to understand what tangible numbers were connected to addressing this issue. Irrespective of whether you decide to use any solutions that we build out or whether you decide to build a solution of your own, right? This is an important problem for you to solve. Again, because closing the post-purchase gap, right? Making sure issues are addressed proactively often means 3 to 4% of your customers actually continue staying with the brand. The math behind this is not very, very hard, right? About 1 in 10 packages actually meets with an issue. So that probably means around 10% of your customers are having a post-purchase issue. And about 33% of those customers are going to leave your brand. Again, there is very, very strong research around this. So if you're able to close this gap here, it probably means 3 to 4% of your customers are going to stay. And it's easy for your brand to come up with a dollar value for this again, because you probably know what the lifetime value of the customer is. If you go from there, we've often seen brands where the dollar value of or the lifetime value of a customer is hundreds or even thousands of dollars. It means losing these customers here in the after spending so much time and effort acquiring them in the long run is very, very expensive for your brand, right? And also, when we talk about having customers very, very engaged with your brand, especially in the post-purchase space, where they've already completed a purchase, they're in a really happy spot as far as their experience curve is concerned. Engaging with them, having them really engage in this phase of the purchase often means there is a 60% possibility of them spending even more money with your brand, right? And customers who are kept happy, enthusiastic, and very, very engaged with your brand all through the experience, right till the product reached the doorstep, without any issues, or even more importantly, I mean, research says even more happier than a person who had never faced an issue is a person who had an issue, but then your brand exceeded expectations in solving that issue, right? Such a customer who considers himself connected, very engaged with your brand, very happy with the purchase, is 90% more likely to reorder from you again, right? And that brings us to probably a very important question you guys have in your mind. Hey, we did speak about this purchase space. Yes, we did identify a gap here, but then what could it potentially cost me to address this gap? And I have the amazing news for you here, because we were only speaking about this gap from the your brand's perspective and your customer's perspective, right? But then there is also another party involved here, your shipping carrier. So just like how your customers are affected by this bad experience, your shipping carrier probably has a contract with you where you're insulated from these bad experiences, right? Like you are not liable to pay for service which did not match the promise they made. So this means when these mistakes happen on the post-purchase side, you are probably eligible to recover the shipping costs paid to your shipping carrier for the mistakes that happened. This can often amount to 10, 20, even 20% of your shipping costs. So if you set out to solve these problems, it means you're able to recoup the costs here. We do that for our customers. Even if you set out to build your own solution, you may be able to recoup some of these costs here, which can go towards solving this problem for customers. Or maybe in implementing a solution like ours, again, it's not going to be expensive, often makes you money in the long run. So we want to ensure that this problem is made more visible. And at the end of the day, you're able to close this gap on the experience front in the post-purchase space, which in turn strengthens the bond that you have with customers. And when this is addressed well, it often means you have customers who you stay with you for a long, long time, often for life, and you're able to, at the end of the day, make sure they have an amazing experience overall with every purchase they make.
Okay. Yeah.
So that brings us, again, at the end of the day, we did want to check for a brief moment if anybody here who has spent time with us today is interested in having a quick demo of how the solution works, either with the intent of using this or maybe with the intent of using your own solution that you build out later in this phase. Feel free to just answer this poll. Somebody from both Freshworks and lateshipment.com can get in touch with you. So I'll leave a few seconds for that before we close out. So, yep, that brings us to the end of the webinar. I'm glad both Ashwin and I were able to talk about something that is very close to our heart, and also talk about a topic that is not often covered. Again, you can definitely reach out to either of us. Our contact information is up here. We'll be glad to talk to you offline about anything that we discussed today. And that also keeps us open to questions that came in during the webinar. Feel free to add any more questions here. We will try going through everything that is on the console up until this point.
Yeah, so there is one interesting question from Deepak. Deepak has asked, since it's holiday season, a lot of people would be ordering gifts for someone else. So Deepak is curious if extra care has to be taken. You're spot on, Deepak. So this is something that a lot of companies will also have to keep in mind during the holiday season, or be it any other festive season as well. People are ordering for someone else, so there is that extra care that has to be taken to make sure it reaches on time. It could be someone's birthday, or it could be someone's anniversary, or it could be someone's last day at work. So every hour, every minute, every couple of hours there actually matters. So as a vendor, you might think, hey, instead of 10 a.m. in the morning, it's just going to reach at 4 p.m. in the evening. So what difference is it going to make? But when someone is ordering for someone else, it makes a lot of difference there. And if you are being proactive, so that's where the proactive approach here helps. If you're being proactive and letting them know that, hey, your order is going to reach on this particular time, is that okay? So 4 out of 5 times customers will be okay if you tell them proactively, but that one-off case where you see actually they say, hey, this is actually a special day for us, why don't you try shipping it beforehand? That's something you can intervene, and you can talk to your carriers and figure a way for that particular item to reach that particular person on time. So that's one extra step that you can take that will make sure you actually have them and also the person they are gifting it to. So you're actually acquiring a new customer there. And so that's a very good question, Deepak. So you need to go that extra mile, especially when
it also means often these issues do not actually are not apparent, right? As a customer, whether you're ordering for yourself, ordering for somebody else, often failures in the post-purchase space happen in an unexpected fashion. Everything seems to be going right. Suddenly you're tracking a package. It's not there in your mailbox when you expect it. That's a very disappointing situation to be in, even if it's an order is for yourself. And that's what we are trying to highlight here. Again, another question here from Mohan says, online trade is price-driven than service-driven. Well, it's sure, on the surface, we may think that a lot of these things are always price-driven. But then, sure, if something is half the price, half the price or 1/4 the price of what you might find it somewhere else, maybe you're going to go with that decision on price, right? But then as the prices get closer, as the prices start converging, you're probably going to choose a merchant that you trust more, right? That is the reason people tend to take the brands that have given them a good experience in the past, right? That's why the Amazons of the world start placing a lot of emphasis on the customer experience. That's why Apple, often sells products at a more expensive price than many other third-party stores. But then people still walk into an Apple store because of the purchase experience, right? I have an iPhone in front of me right now, and a MacBook that we're presenting from. These were brought from Apple stores, despite knowing the fact that price was not something that Apple was competing on, right? So as we continue growing into a more and more experience-focused customer, just like how price is an important determining factor, we expect experience to also become such an important factor in determining where you purchase from. And we're seeing that transition happen right in front of our eyes. So, Clayton, I think one last question here. Clayton, 3PL companies, yes, we do work with 3PL companies. I'm sure Freshworks also does work with them. At lateshipment.com, we also work with them. And definitely please reach out to us. We can see how best to help you out.
Right? Yes, we have a lot of 3PL companies we work with on a daily basis as well.
And again, that brings us to the end of the webinar. I know we're closing time. We want to appreciate the fact that all of us are able to join us, and at the same time, respect for your time, and make sure we're able to close out on time. Please feel free to engage with us at our direct email addresses or reaching out to either Freshworks or lateshipment.com. Thank you very much for being able to join us today. I hope you have a great day ahead.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining. Have a great day. Bye-bye.